While we welcome the cerebral palsy community to share their stories, it does not mean as an organisation we endorse and agree with all the views and decisions of our interviewees. Using both human rights and person-centred approaches, CP Diaries is a safe space that allows people from diverse experiences and backgrounds to share their stories. Please note this episode may be confronting for some people, as it contains derogatory language related to school bullying and emotional content based on sibling relationships. If this subject matter may distress you, please carefully consider watching this video. This month on CP Diaries, I do something a little different. I sit down with my sister Aisling and we talk about the experiences of what it's like to be a sibling to someone with cerebral palsy. So we're talking about being a sibling today, which is like a topic I wanted to do because I feel like even though this is a spot for people with CP, I feel like the issue of being a sibling of someone with CP or any disability is really complicated. And I feel that people don't talk about it enough. And you and I have sort of talked about it a bit.
Yeah, of course.
Had some delicate conversations that initially for me were a bit of shock.
Yeah, of course.
I think we first started talking about it properly. I feel like I have memories of like proper conversations, maybe more when I was a late teens, early adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah.
Because you're 4 years older than me. So maybe that was the age you thought I could start to process it.
I think it wasn't even that. I think it's where I realized as well, you know, the thing with when someone's disabled, they're disabled for life, you know, and you're still going to, like now I look back on it and I look at it completely differently. Like, I think then as a teenager, I was a bit more impatient. You know, when you're like, well, person just going to get on with it. And then you realize it's not a choice. It's you, like, what I know now is that your challenges are just different than mine.
Yeah. And I remember being a teen, particularly when we were teenagers. Again, I particularly by the time I was 14, you would have been like 18. It registered for me as well. I think how fed up and angry you were sometimes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it
And
created tension.
Yeah. I think, I was. There's no other way. And it was probably that the age I was at, I think as well, there was ways in it was affecting you in other ways then, which I didn't understand as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what it did for your confidence and then perhaps your mental health. I didn't know that this was where this was going to go. I didn't realize that it went beyond like a physical disability.
And like that's a really good point because I don't think we're a big family. So for people watching at home, we're a family of 7, and that's just our initial family.
And not just that, one of 5 girls, you know.
5 girls and mum and dad. So mum and dad included, I don't think any of them realized, and myself included, how it would bleed into things like confidence and body image and mental health. Because that was one thing mum and dad couldn't get educated on because there's still little info about that. Because you're the youngest sister out of all of them, I was talking to Colette the other day and she was saying how she understood right away that I was going to have a disability. But do you remember when you registered?
I think I was still very young when you were born. I think I was like 4.5 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any exact like memories as such. Like I do have memories of you as a baby. When it came to the stage where, because you were my first little sister, because obviously I'm the second youngest, when it was coming for this, like obviously I had certain expectations, you know, from you even as a child. So when you weren't hitting those, like my expectations as a 5-year-old of, oh, when's she going to start crawling? Like, you know, Beck's little sister crawls. When's my little sister going to crawl? It was always made aware that you were different. I think as far as for me really understanding the capacity of what that meant for you having a disability and me being the sister, you know, or a sibling of someone with a disability, didn't hit till you started primary school. And I think that there was the first 2 years of when you started primary school where I really did feel like, wow, my world's just been flipped upside down.
Yeah. You know? And that was going to be my next question. Like, how did it affect you in a school setting in particular?
At school, it was hard. It was so hard because you start school. I was maybe 10 years old. You were 9 or 10. You were whatever. You were a preppy, and you started school, and then straight away I had 500 plus kids. You've got 500 kids. Well intended. Curious and all the rest. Like constantly reminding you, hey, your sister, walks funny. Your sister, she's, you're like, and then that really hits. And that was where I was like, wow, she is different. She's really different.
Yeah.
I can, and obviously for me, it was, I'd be very angry I'd be extremely protective of you. I think for grade 3 and 4, like that's a lot of my memories, just that anger and, like, oh, I've got to look after her. And also a lot of embarrassment. Like, I don't want the sister who walks funny. I just want like her to be like everyone else.
Where do you think the embarrassment came from specifically?
Oh, because the peers, like, I mean, people were making comments like, oh, is your sister a retard? So that was hard. I hated hearing that.
Yeah.
And so that where it was like, well, I don't want to be, like as a kid, you think, oh, well, I don't want a retarded sister. I want to, and
Yeah.
it's horrible.
When they were saying that to you, did you have a different understanding? Was it, I don't want the retarded sister, or was it, I know she's not, so please don't call her that?
Well, it depended on the day. Like 90% of the time, I think I was extremely protective. I remember the last time someone called you a retard, though, because I ended up hitting the person. Not proud of it at all, but it's amazing how quickly that stopped all of a sudden.
And we were actually talking about this the other day or a few weeks ago when I first broached the topic.
I was 10 years old, so it's not as if, they're probably looking at me like, what's wrong with this woman? But I was 10 years old and I didn't know how to cope with all the feelings.
Yeah.
But soon after that, I did feel, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to, that is not a solution.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people realized, oh, okay, like children don't realize, okay, this is this person's limit. I think everyone then realized, okay, that's the limit. We don't say that to Ash, and maybe we'll lay off Natalie. We'll lay off Natalie as well.
Was high school, we only had 1 year together in high school because I came into 7th grade as you were doing 12th.
High school was completely different.
Yeah.
I think by this stage, everyone knew, what else was different in like year 7 and funny in reflection. I think, God, that was such a bad time for this to happen. You had your operation and you were in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I was in year 12. I wasn't studious. So
I remember, Ash.
I would be called if you needed to go to the toilet, I would come take you. But then I constantly remember, or even we shared a room, obviously with 5 girls, you never had your own room, especially if you were the youngest too.
Yeah.
And this was back in the day when no one had their own rooms really.
Yeah.
And you, in the night, you would obviously you couldn't move, you were immobile, your legs were in cast up to your thighs.
Yeah.
And so during the night, you'd need to be rolled over. But I remember at that time, you were really aware that, oh God, I'm an inconvenience on her, because I would come to you at lunchtime and I was like, I haven't been called once today to take you to the toilet. Like, what have you got, an iron bladder, or what's going on?
Something to this day, people ask me if I've got an iron bladder. I don't know if that's I went out for drinks with a friend the other day and we were hanging out for hours, and she's like, I'm going to the bathroom, do you want to come? And then I'm like, I'm good. And she's like, I'm worried, do you have like a camel's bladder?
Yeah. So you were like, yeah, you were like, I just don't like bugging you. And I'm like, yeah, but if you need to go toilet, you need to go toilet. Like, and same with when you did need to be turned in the middle of the night, like obviously you'd have to wake me and you'd just be like, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, don't worry about it. It's like, it's not as if I'm studying, so, but you were, I think, like we were a bit more understanding of each other by that stage, in that stage of our, relationship, like after seeing what you went through in primary school to some extent. And then I think we just, yeah, you're
right. Having the surgery when I had it was a real catch-22, because from a physical perspective, it was the ideal time to do it. I remember why the doctors explained it. It was because I was 12 going on 13, so my bones were fully fused, and I was old enough that, you know, my growth hadn't finished. So from a physical standard, it was ideal.
Yeah.
Emotionally and mentally, halfway through
Yeah.
7th grade, worst time to do it, because
Yeah.
it reinforced, I guess, a story about me. And
Yeah.
I remember going for the surgery, and within weeks of the surgery, I noticed a shift in how my peers interacted with me. And it was
Yeah.
really
Right.
hard.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah, it was really, really hard. What about mum and dad? Like, do you feel like, how did you, when you had frustrations or concerns, or you were having a tough day with it, how did you relate that back to them?
It was bad enough that I had to, like, I feel like, see it without having to relive it in the evenings then, do you
Yeah,
know? And it wasn't all the time. It's not as if you were getting, or I was getting comments all the time, but it was had a massive impact when it did, because this was all new to me,
yeah,
especially when I was younger. But I think as far as, like, you just don't want to be a burden, because I'm able-bodied, so I shouldn't have, you know, nothing's going to be greater than your problem. You kind
yeah.
of get into that mindset.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that in our own way, we both felt like we were burdens. Like I felt
Mm.
like a burden post-surgery, and you felt like a burden having any kind of bad day.
Yeah, exactly. I think even with a household of like 5 girls, like, it's stressful, I imagine. Do you know what I mean? Or you would notice that it would be stressful, so you don't want to
Yeah.
add to it.
It's funny, that's actually something that stayed with me, because I feel like with four sisters, there was no BS. And I feel like growing up now as a 30-something-year-old woman with a disability, I've encountered other people with disabilities, and I can tell which ones were sheltered and which ones were
Yeah,
coddled, because
yeah,
they almost have a childlike quality.
yeah.
And they almost seem like they can be completely
Mollycoddled.
savvy, but socially they're a bit behind, and it's really sad.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. Was there a different level of attention that you think?
Yeah, 100%. And then that as well, you're kind of like, oh God, um, like sometimes you don't feel that, like, not all your own emotional needs get met, because everything's just like, you know, you grow up around this disability. And I'm not saying you
Yeah,
as we're included in that, you're not separate, you're almost separate to that, because you didn't ask for any of this, you didn't ask for any form of like special treatment or anything like that.
mm.
But you're kind of like just designing your life around this disability.
I think
Yeah.
it's kind of a contradiction, because, and I've had friends with disabilities say the same thing. You know, someone said to me the other day, "Oh, my sister hates me," and I said, "Well, why does she hate you?" And she's like, because she thinks I got all the attention growing up."
Yeah, of
And
course.
I was like, you know, I've heard similar things. I mean, I hope my sisters don't hate me because of it, but I've
No,
definitely,
no, no. Yeah.
yeah. But then I said to her, you know, it's funny because we probably look at it like the other way, like, well, it was a certain kind of attention that no one would want.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you know, like
Yeah.
I would have easily traded.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like
Yeah,
that, you know, and the thing is, and it's probably the same on your end, like, you know, there's always like, oh, well, why? And you would have been asking the same questions, like, but probably in your own, from your own experience, like, whereas I'd be like, well, why is Natalie getting this? Why isn't Natalie getting in trouble for that? Why isn't that? And the answer was always one of two. It's because she has a disability, or it's because I don't have a disability. You know, the answer was, in some ways it felt like, and I feel like that sounds a bit crappy, but it's an element of it was true.
and you know what, it rings a bell for me, because I always felt like I couldn't win, because I particularly, and that's something I noticed post surgery at high school, that was the thing I heard all the time at high school. Like if I were, it was ridiculous, because I might be like a few minutes late getting to class, and keep in mind I'm getting to class in like a literal Zimmer frame. So,
I forgot about the
literal, like a
thing.
granny Zimmer frame, and I wouldn't get in trouble. And then a whole class of 30 teenagers with brooding hormones would be like, well, why isn't she getting in trouble? And the teacher would be like, leave it. And then I became like public enemy numero uno,
Yeah.
different set of standards. And that was real. I was like, oh my God, I almost wish I were in trouble.
It would be,
Yeah.
it would.
Yeah,
It was
it would.
really hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true. Yeah.
What were the positives of having a sibling with a disability?
I don't know. I think it was definitely character building for me. I don't want to say more so than my other sisters because that's not true, but I think because I was at a stage where like me reacting so strongly was acceptable. Like, say, you wouldn't probably accept like a 12 or a teenager hitting another child, or do you know what I mean? Or, yeah, I suppose it was definitely character building.
Yeah.
And I think it's made me kinder to others, I think, you know.
So, what advice would you give to other siblings of children with disabilities?
I think there's days where you're just going to want to take a day off, being a sibling to someone with a disability. It's like sad, but it's true because it can be exhausting. Like I find, especially maybe when in our younger years, when you were quite, you were unstable. And so I would often have to hold your hand and stuff. And I'd be like, oh, I just don't want to do this today. But just remember that your sibling can't take a day off. And I think as well, like probably the biggest point, which I kind of discussed before, um, you're not truly going to understand, like even where you're at now. I don't know, are you a sibling to like a teenager, a child, or what the case is, but just being patient with how this disability could
Yeah.
evolve.
Thanks for sitting down with me, and I'll see you at the next family function, hopefully.
All right, bye.
Bye.
CPSN acknowledges that people with CP can experience stigma and shame, so we encourage respect for all people with CP, as inherent dignity will empower them to access the appropriate support and services. Dignity and respect can only be achieved by promoting, protecting, and ensuring the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. We value your feedback and experiences. If you have any questions, please use the following links below to contact the appropriate communication channels. So, if you want to share your experience or share your story, please send us a direct message. We'd love to hear your story.